did you go to school?
And here's your...
What do you think of what's going on right now, mate?
These evil little invisible parasites.
Satan-worshipping Freemason moron.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
We're not run by factions.
Get the fuck out of camera!
There are much more powerful international forces in play.
Is this pink eye? Is this what pink eye is? I don't fucking know what's happening.
Please go outside and look at the moon quickly.
It's been crazy, guys, but guess what? It's how it is, mate.
Mate, because I want to do you slowly.
But I ain't spending any time on it.
Welcome to Conditional Release Program. I'm Joel Hill. We are Peteless today, and instead we are joined by Ed Coper, a good friend of the podcast, both of us, and author of the excellent book, Facts and Other Lies, Welcome to the Disinformation Age. This is right up your wheelhouse, isn't it, listeners? Yes, you're very keen. Go and buy it. This was published in 2023, so it's pretty fresh, and it looks back on the way the post-truth era has turned into the disinformation age, and boy, oh fucking boy, has it. It is hurting my face. The book combines a sort of academic research and real-world examples of disinformation with a sprinkling of kind of funny dad jokes. You really can tell you've reproduced in this book, just in the copy. It's kind of funny. The audiobook is excellent. Unfortunately, it's not read by the author, but the actual book has a decent amount of screenshots and images to provide sort of context for some of the claims. So I recommend, of course, you go and buy both. Look, to introduce Ed, basically Ed is an example of the adage, you can't bullshit a bullshitter, because he's essentially a hired gun for progressive political and commercial organizations to communicate with the public in a way that appeals to their sort of human decency and goodwill, which, oh man, I don't know, you might be out of business soon. That sounds like a DEI hire to me. But he is one of the good guys, and he's one of the very few weapons we have on the side of the good guys, and we need him. So buy his book. Anyway, so look, while he does use his powers for good, the understanding of the bullshit factory from this close proximity to it has made this book a uniquely powerful guide to disinformation. And I would say this out of a limb, as opposed to many other books that have attempted to cover the topic, they've got more of a journalistic approach. It feels like a well-written university essay as opposed to someone who actually kind of knows what they're talking about. So I can't speak highly enough about this book. Also, I can't speak highly enough about Ed, who I must admit did warn me not to bet on Kamala Harris, and the reasons he told me not to and that Trump could get up were pretty much all the reasons I heard on mid-tier shitty podcasts about why the Democrats lost. So that hurts. And, you know, they claimed all this was on the power of hindsight, but this bastard knew it the whole time, which, you know, leads me to think that maybe you're a time traveler or just really clever. I'm not sure. And while I didn't listen to him then, you should listen to him now. We should listen to him now because he knows his shit. He's very clever. I've been trying to get him on here for many, many moons, and we finally got there. And it's never been more important to not only be across what the bullshit factory means for us and society in general, but how to handle it, and especially how to stop yourself from being part of the problem, because you might be. Go and read the book to find out why. Or keep listening. And Ed, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. As you say, long-time listener, first-time caller. You just for the listeners should know that you're not a paid spokesman for the book, but you're doing a very good job. Everyone should obviously go out and buy a copy.
A free copy. It's bullshit.
I've got to say, being a long-time listener, you know, I thought you would host me in very fancy plush recording suites, you know, where I can, you know, what is that, some bottles of Lafroig behind you on the shelf there. I thought this would be more like a bit like Drunk History type of vibe there, but I am
the Soros checks
through the computer here, which I guess is appropriate. We're going to talk a lot about the internet, so
we are.
That's probably appropriate.
And the miracle of the internet, and also the mistake of the internet, and the midpoint. I think the midpoint is important as well. So let's kick off with something that I don't think is uniquely internet, but certainly has materialized in a way on the internet that is unique. It's the information tribe. This is something you discuss in your book, and I'm going to mostly kick off with questions on the book and then go to more wider societal things, and God knows where we'll end up. But these information tribes are people basically posting things with this idea of, I'm going to post this because my people will see that I believe in climate change. Or on the flip side, I will post this to make sure my people believe I don't believe in man-made climate change and all those sort of things. Like, these things can sometimes be a matter of self-protection and preservation of your status in community and stuff like that. And this has gone to a point, I would say, where cookers have made these little communities online, especially when they go so extreme, they alienate from their families. And they post things because they want their people to validate them. And you know what? In these cooker communities, I've never seen so much validation in my life. Love bombing is a word I would use. But let's go through the information tribe thing, because I must say this is one of those things, as sort of, to put it sort of loosely, cooker watchers will really relate to, I think.
Well, I guess the first most fundamental thing to understand about misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy, rabbit holes, etc., that people miss is that as human beings, we don't give a flying fuck about the truth.
Yeah, right? That's true. Yeah,
but that's not how we cover this topic. We cover this topic as if we should all, care mostly whether something is true and false. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. This is like how we are hardwired. This is millions of years of evolution have got us to this point, right?
Yeah,
and the truth is important to us to some degree.
It's nice.
It's nice to have relationships of trust, and you build trust by being mostly truthful for us.
It's easier
between us. Exactly.
Don't have to remember your lies. That's cool.
It is. It's often the easiest thing is to, truth is the best policy. But that's just a means to an end, right? And the end is the important thing, and that is our social connections. We give a shit about our social connections. In fact,
yes, we do.
Everything we do is about thinking the same as our peers, being liked by our peers, being seen as a good person by our peers. And so when you look at things that don't make sense, like, say, Trump supporters doing crazy things or supporting the batshit crazy things he says, people fundamentally miss that that's all part of their warm fuzzies, right? The fact that he's lying, the fact that he gets up liberals' noses, proves to them that he is a good person, and they become a good person by signaling the same things. So, I certainly hope you didn't place any money on Kamala Harris winning the presidency, Joel, because that would have been a terrible idea for precisely this reason, right?
Yeah.
The Democrats were running a campaign where they said, Donald Trump's going to ruin our institutions. We got to stand up for them. And all of his supporters said, who gives a fuck? That sounds like a wonderful signal that he's on my tribe because I think things aren't working. Yeah. And the other tribe are telling me things are working, and they're telling me all the wonderful things that they've done for me. That doesn't feel like the same tribe. So no matter how much we dress this up in politics and technology, etc., it all comes back to the really, really simple fact that we are primal creatures who want to get along with our tribe. Now, the problem is, as I'm sure we'll cover, is our tribes are now splintered into these tiny internet echo chambers, and that becomes a big problem. But to think about the most powerful tribe that you've seen recently, it is these MAGA people in America, and they know Trump's not telling the truth. They know what they're spewing is not true. They don't care. It's so unimportant in the hierarchy of their needs that people are missing the point when they give them factual corrections.
Yeah, that's it. And they've got the world's richest man on their side, which is very empowering. There's so much.
It helps when you got a big megaphone. And in fact, another good example of where we saw people signaling to others, I'm a good person, look at me, like me, is Mark Zuckerberg. Right? Yeah. The whole world has just watched while he's put his hand up and said, look at me, I'm a good person. I'm going to say the things that I think you want me to say, i.e., let's get rid of any censorship of speech. Let's get rid of fact-checking. Let's, just completely swing hard for MAGA. He's doing that thing. He wants to fit in. I don't know what he was like at high school. I don't imagine he had a lot of friends, and he's desperate to fit in with his new friends in Capitol Hill. Yeah. And unfortunately, Elon Musk's the same. They have big megaphones. They have all the world's resources at their disposal, and we're about to see the world get remade in their image because that tribe has won for now.
Yeah, it's kind of terrifying, but we'll see how much the sort of progressive forces can sort of, form tribes and then move forward in maybe some sort of organized way, but hopefully not do it in a way that is really fucking stupid and causes a lot of problems. You know what? I don't have a lot of faith in that. I've seen people organize it.
Don't bet any more money on them not doing that.
That's banned from betting.
That's my next tip.
I'm banned. I'm just banned from Betfair. I'm blocked. Anyway, so how about the concept of shared reality, which features in your book? I think that's a fleeting concept, and I think it's getting worse and worse in the fact that we don't have a shared commonality. We don't watch the 7 o'clock news. We don't know the things that are happening. We get our information from social media, which does have like an echo chamber, but It's one of those things where it's almost like the Canberra bubble. When you get into Canberra and you're hanging out around Parliament House, you talk about all this sort of stuff, then you come back to Sydney and you're like, oh man, did you hear what like the Education Minister said? And they're like, no, I didn't. Why would, what? No. What? Who cares?
You must have experienced this, though. You mean not everyone's as big a political nerd as you are, Joel?
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
Aren't we just?
Look, I don't want to be too nostalgic for like the bygone era and saying everything was wonderful,
right?
But there's a big difference that makes things pretty well organized back then and very disorganized now, and that is we largely got our information from the same sources.
For better or worse.
I'm not saying that they were right. I'm not saying they were unbiased. Of course, like the media's always have had their ideological bents. They've always had their biases. There's, that's not the case. But the fact is, you and I got the same information from the same sources, and then we could interpret it differently, argue about it differently, go and, seek out other information. That was a very hard thing to do. There was a shared baseline, and it wasn't necessarily a shared baseline at facts. So like, it was sometimes wrong and sometimes biased.
Yeah.
But at least it put us all on the same playing field that we could then, argue about and divide amongst, your opinion when it comes to that. So you think of something like Port Arthur, which happened in that context. There was, a shocking event. We all received the same information about it. And yes, a few conspiracy nuts then took that information and went down rabbit holes. And, all the conspiracies at the time were that it was similar to what you hear now, that was an inside job to get rid of all the guns in Australia and, blah, 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 blah. Not true, we should state for your listeners.
Oh, of course, very offensive.
That happened, right? That happened. I'm sure we'll touch on it later in the podcast about why people, manufacture conspiracy theories. But the difference is that stayed very fringe. It took a long time to emerge. And by consensus, we all agreed on the facts of what happened in Port Arthur. And those conspiracy theories never had any consequence.
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine if that same event happened right now, when the vast majority of people who hear about it will do so through social media, even if you're getting it from the news, pages of social media, they feel like it's news.
And there's still comments on those.
Then you get the interpretation of events in real time, and you would get that conspiracy theory in real time. And because we have open access to so much information, you would find some breadcrumb that some internet sleuth picks up, and all of a sudden, we're off to the races. And sure, we would still have a mainstream consensus around the facts, but those conspiracies around it, they would be immediate, they would be much more effective, and the people who fall for them would be lost to that reality around that sort of event. Yeah. So this happens not just on big, big mass global events like that. This happens on every day. All the information has different sources, different interpretations, different voices, different actors, and we don't know what your neighbor is hearing about it versus what you're hearing about it. And you two are on different pages.
Different algorithms.
You're on different pages. You're getting different information, and you put your bins out tonight, and you cannot have a functioning conversation with that neighbor about those events because you have come from two completely different places and you're just on two different pages. Now, that's terrible for a whole bunch of reasons. We live in a society, right? And it's important that we live in a society, and it's important that it's a cohesive and functioning society that is safe and all the rest of it. That's really hard to keep that environment going when you are on a different page than your neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with, there's this sort of sense of like being lonely in a crowd. And that's really tricky. And I think it's something we're going to be facing unpleasantly in the future. Now, another thing.
Look, not to go all doom and gloom on it, but the one reason this is going to get worse is at the moment your neighbor is probably in the same physical reality in terms of the world that they inhabit. Yeah. When we get augmented reality, virtual reality, the metaverse, neurotechnology. They might have a brain-computer interface and live their entire lives on an online reality with, interacting with people who aren't real. This problem will get much bigger.
Yeah. Well, at least if they're in their own metaverse, their extreme sense of racism can be taken out on ones and zeros instead of people. So that's nice, I suppose. That is grim. So when it comes to that sort of thing, so for example, when it comes to the disinformation that you come across, whether it be in the comment section or whether it be actual fake news on things like events that happen at 0 hour, that makes it really difficult because you've got two different ways of dealing with this. Well, two basic ways, which is the debunking and the prebunking of disinformation. And the debunking, of course, being this is what someone said and it's bullshit and here's why. And then prebunking saying, I reckon you're about to see some shit. You might want to be ready because a whole bunch of dickheads are talking nonsense. And I'm not sure if that's your definition. That's how I took it from the book. Do either of these things work? Are they getting more or less effective? Where are we at with that kind of thing? Because debunking, fact-checking, all that sort of stuff appears to be on the out.
So, thanks to your glorious introduction, very flattering, people will know I'm a practitioner, right? And I came to write this book thinking I was going to write about politics and journalism and find my sources, in the news. I ended up learning a ton about neuroscience, right?
Yeah.
It's actually about how our brains work and how our brains are wired. And the reason that social media is so effective, because it doesn't change our brains, it just maps onto our existing characteristics in the existing way they're wired. And so the reason that this is really hard to correct someone's mistaken belief is our brains are essentially lazy and they don't want to do any work. And changing your mind is a lot of labor for your brain to do, right? Like it doesn't hates it. It hates it. And so when I see a piece of information, I will automatically fit it to what my brain already thinks subconsciously.
Cognitive dissonance, basically.
So I look at the LA fires and I believe in climate change and I'm like, see, look, the climate's changed. Look at these terrible fires, right?
It's because you're a stupid V8.
Yeah, that's how I receive information. It fits to my existing worldview. Yeah. Other people see that fire and they see some things. Now, I don't agree with them. They see, look at the woke lefty gender politics have done. That's just how they fit that same information to
Jewish space lasers, maybe.
Jewish space lasers.
There's options. We've got lots of options.
So we approach this topic on the false assumption that when you see information, you will then make your mind up based on what that information is. Complete horseshit, right?
Yeah.
When your mind is already made up, and you will morph that information and twist and contort it subconsciously so you don't have to change your mind. So that makes, in answer to your original question, that makes debunking incredibly difficult. And that's unfortunate because it's really important, right? Sometimes you need, how do you pull people out of rabbit holes? How do you get people to follow instructions in a crisis, evacuate your house, there's a bushfire coming, or get vaccinated or your grandma's going to die, whatever that, how do you, it's important to be able to do that. And there are some ways that are more effective and there are some ways that are less effective. But the important thing to know is that it's really, really, really hard. And changing someone's mind is always going to be harder than prebunking, which is getting to them first. Yeah. So basically, whatever gets to your brain first takes up residence and makes itself very comfy and is very hard to dislodge. So that's great if you can get to people first before misinformation is going to come their way. For example, if I was the federal government and I had to roll out a shit ton of transmission lines and renewable energy infrastructure and, transition the economy to a whole different energy grid, I would be sitting there thinking, oh my God, people are going to face a lot of complete crap about all of this.
Oh yeah,
and you want to get out there first and tell them your reality. You want to say, this is, this energy is necessary if you want to keep your way of life. It's going to bring down your power bills. It's going to, have all these benefits, etc. So that when someone comes along and says it's going to do the opposite, they're the ones that are trying to debunk, not you. Yeah. And they will have a much harder job than you will have. Yeah. And the other really interesting feature for prebunking is it's not just about getting to you with a specific fact. That's important, but it's also about exposing and contextualizing misinformation in general. Yeah. So here's a great example for a study that they did. They took a group of people and said, here is how big tobacco fudged the science between smoking and cancer. Yep. Here are the types of tactics they use. This is why they did it. This is their motives. Here's what, you can recognize in these sorts of patterns. And then subsequently, they took that group of people and showed them climate change disinformation. And the people that had learnt about big tobacco's tactics were much, much better at recognizing the climate change disinformation because it fit a pattern that they already knew in their brain. And a light bulb went off and said, I know what this is. This is this, I've seen this before.
Yep.
This is, the same tactic. And it just made sense to them in a way where they didn't have to change their brain. They didn't have to learn anything new. They didn't have to change an opinion. And so we can do those sorts of things by saying, hey, we're about to have an election. People will be out there, nefarious actors who are going to try to, dupe you into believing X, Y, and Z. Here's why they do it. They're trying to make money. They're grifters or they're, Iranian bots or whatever they are. And you contextualize it. You explain it. You say, look, Russia's about to invade Ukraine. They're probably going to do a false flag operation. Here's what it'll look like.
Yeah.
If you then see, the first thing you see is a headline of that false flag operation, you think, oh, I know exactly what this is. I've been warned about this. If you never got that prebunking and just saw, oh, look, all this Russian villages have been massacred by Ukrainian troops.
Yeah.
That would become your reality. And then you subsequently hear, oh, the American authorities think that it might have been a false flag operation, but the Russians are saying this and the Ukrainians are saying this. And you're in that battle for meaning and context. Whereas if you'd been warned it was going to happen already, you immediately would have processed that information correctly. Yeah. And it wouldn't disturb any of your reality. So 100% better to try and pre-bunk than try to debunk, even though sometimes you don't get the opportunity.
Pre-bunk, it's difficult, if not impossible, but if you have the opportunity, it does seem like one of those things is more effective. It's a really difficult battle. It's that thing of the bullshit asymmetry principle, the whole Brandolini's law thing. And even if debunking did work, it's still so much effort to take some wild claim from some fuckwit who's just like, and then you have to go through and be like, okay, here's why isn't real. And that takes you an hour and it took them 30 seconds.
And even when people want to be corrected, right? So you might be thinking, and the listeners, the types of stuff you talk on this show, you're a lot of people who don't want to be corrected, and they're really, strongly their identity is linked to their conspiracies, etc. But even when you are open to being corrected, don't underestimate the power of the brain. So
totally.
people have done studies showing that you can go and show someone all this information to correct some, mistaken belief they had. And they go and say, all right, yep, you're absolutely right. I'm 100% convinced the earth is round, not flat, my bad. And they go away thinking, I've been corrected. You go back 24 hours later and ask that person, and they've reverted back to thinking the earth is flat.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't last. Even when you debunk, it doesn't last. It's very fleeting because the brain's like, I had that knowledge for like an hour, right? I'm just going to go stop thinking about it, go back to whatever I knew and, assume my usual, beliefs. And that's hard because that's with people who are open to being corrected, let alone people who don't want to be corrected.
Yeah, no, it's a battle and it's a losing one. It is really tricky like that, and we'll continue down that path in a sec. Where I want to go with this, which is an important part of just general sort of like information digital warfare, is when you're in the trenches, possibly on Twitter, but you shouldn't be there. Maybe on Blue Sky, aggressively agreeing with someone you completely have no differences with whatsoever. How can we tell whether you're talking to a robot? And is it getting to a point now, like, can we tell anymore? Like, have we is the Turing test just fucking out the window? Like, is it over?
Yeah, look, Blue Sky is a good one. It's literally a clone of Twitter. It's from the same engineers, the same code, and they split off at some point. I don't have any followers on there. It's very sad because I just started my account. So everyone,
it's very quiet.
Ed Coper at Blue Sky. I don't even know what the handles are.
Good,
but you just two of you join, you can double my followers. So I'll give you a big shout out. It's look at the moment, it's relatively easy to tell if you're talking to a robot, but the point is it's getting harder and harder, and there's no point really putting a lot of energy into teaching people how to spot the signs, because very soon the robots will be as convincing as
those signs
are.
we've gone.
So ChatGPT has upgraded its models about 3 or 4 times since there was all that big hype about its, big one. You will recall when that was the moment we all started talking about AI, and the big leap forward it has just made in its latest model is astounding. I used to be able to really good. Thank you for the shout out. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. I used to be really good at having a bullshit detector for things that were written with AI. I've had people apply for jobs with AI written tasks, and it was really obvious.
Yeah.
And this new model already, I don't think I could tell. It's taken great leaps forward. So the technology that people are going to use to have these bot farms, the types of things we look for now are going to get harder and harder to tell.
Yeah,
and
I use AI to detect AI. That's how it sort of works. This is very sad. Someone made a poem for our friend Warren Brown on the journey from London to Sydney on Facebook, and I didn't have the heart to tell him, but I looked at it and I was like, that looks like bullshit. I reckon that's AI. Chucked in an AI detector and it was like, 90% AI. I'm like, okay, maybe you corrected a couple of paragraphs, but you got that from ChatGPT. And he was so touched. He reposted. He was so, oh my God, thank you so much. And I'm like, oh, you just got bullshit so hard by some asshole who's like, oh, make me a poem about someone driving from Sydney to London. And I'm just like, nah. But I don't know. Yeah, like that's the thing. It is getting tricky because I also had to cook a poem, which was, I can't even remember what it was. It was really shit. And I saw it and I thought, yeah, that's got to be AI. I put it through a few AI detector models and it said basically no chance of being AI. And I was convinced that it was so bad.
And like I say now, sometimes there's shit writing and sometimes it's ChatGPT and the more we try and look for the clues now, the more obsolete they'll be tomorrow.
Oh, the blur, mate.
So the way that bots and bot farms worked when I wrote the book, which is, a couple of years ago now, is there's, thousands and thousands of fake Twitter accounts. They don't have any followers. They don't have any images for their profile. They say the same thing over and over again. And that's the big cue, right? You can program them to say, copy and paste this phrase. Every time someone mentions Palestine, I will copy and paste the same phrase in as a reply. And it's really easy to detect because it's carbon copy. Now, where we're going with the trend in like bots 2.0 is this technology allowing it to post something different every time.
Yeah.
That's in response to the poster that seems much more authentic, much more in communication with what you've just said, and it will seem like a more human reply, and it won't be the same as anything else they're posting. So it'll be hard for the bot detection systems to also detect them because it looks like it's a normal human engaging and interacting with this. And if you layer on top of this, its ability to scrape your online profile, right? What is your online footprint, right? And the scary thing is the internet knows a shit ton about you. And so, all of those deep, dark secrets, Joel, I'm afraid, someone is scraping the internet right now. And in the future, they will be tailoring that engagement with you to connect. So, for example, if you're a fan of Nine Inch Nails, right? That bot is going to be making an outreach to you, referring to your shared love of some song or album or gig or something. They might see a photo you posted on Facebook 10 years ago at a Nine Inch Nails gig, and they say, hey, I was at the show in Warsaw. Were you there in, 2004? And you're like, hey, you get me, man. Yeah. That's the bot, right? 2.0. Yeah. So it's going to be very, very hard to do. And of course, in a political sense, how these bots are weaponized is like understanding how to push your buttons, to make you pissed off about Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever. Yeah. That's going to be way more effective. Or Tom Hanks. Yeah. That's going to be way more effective if they know what your buttons to push are and they can connect with you. And, it's going to be very much more personalized and much more effective.
Yeah, that is definitely happening. And I wasn't in Warsaw in 2004, but I was in France and England in 2005 for the Nine Inch Nails with Teeth tour. So it was close. It was very close.
Almost got it. That would have been impressive off the fly. So
very good. If you said
maybe I'd make a good bot if I need to outreach, to you and convince you that, Hillary Clinton is a predator who wants to steal your children. I know now. We talk about Europe in 2005,
I'd be really worried though, because you're the kind of guy who would know that. So I'm I was already nervous. But yeah, so like generally speaking, like the kind of like, yeah, we can't really sort of stay ahead of these ideas of like who we're speaking to and how we're doing it. But when it comes to the next generation, we have a chance to pre-bunk the pre-bunk with something like a media literacy curriculum in high schools. And I think they're already doing that.
Yeah, look, and it's this should be a core part of the curriculum, and obviously, you know, nobody's doing enough, but at least we're starting to talk about it. And you know, my to borrow a line from the book, you know, I don't know the last time I used sine, cos, or tan, but I inhabit the internet every day, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know,
That's
what
it.
are the skills that kids need to inhabit the world that they will inherit from us?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who think about digital media literacy, it's very simple. It's how do I train you to spot a headline and tell if it's true or false? I actually think it's much broader than that. It's about how do we train the next generation of digital citizens, right? So citizens have rights and responsibilities.
Yep.
You inhabit a world that you're a citizen in, and you learn what you need to do, what you shouldn't do, what the harms of other people doing that is, how to interact with those around you. We just got to update that for the digital era. So, you know, I think cyberbullying is one area where we've actually made some progress here, because it's a much more obvious manifestation of the fact that, like, oh, it's different being a citizen online right now, because you can actually really hurt people. And this is a different set of skills that our parents didn't have. How, you know, I've got kids who will be in high school in a couple of years. I don't know how to teach them about cyberbullying because I never experienced it. So
yeah, so true. Yeah.
What are the skills? So it's about broadening that to say you live in an information ecosystem, you live in a society. A lot of this is online. A lot of it is manipulated. Can you believe media? You know, those are really, really big questions that we don't have the curriculum to teach yet. But that's what we've got to do. It's much more so than just saying spotting a fake headline. That those are really big systemic changes. And so that's probably the biggest long-term policy solution that we can do, because the risk for, you know, if you're 16 years old and you're getting all your information from, you know, apps like TikTok or Red Note or whatever people are going to use, whatever the next one is, you're growing up in a world where anyone is a creator. And so any information you see, you don't trust instinctively, because someone could have made it. Your friend could have made it in their bedroom, right?
And your friend's full of shit.
Old people grew up in a world where if they saw something on the TV or read it in the newspaper, they were predisposed to believe it. Young people are growing up where they see something, they are predisposed to not believe it.
Yeah,
so
okay.
That's a problem. That's a problem not just for misinformation, that's a problem for information, right? How do you get information to the next generation in that environment? How do you convince them that you are real, right? How do you convince them you're not a robot? It's much more important than learning them how to, you know, teaching them how to spot, you know, who is a robot.
So is that resulting in some sort of like weird maladjusted nihilism in the children who sort of see everything and sort of deny everything and work their way backwards from there as a default position or something like that?
Well, if they thought that Gen X was cynical, wait till you get a generation raised where you can't believe any information and anyone can be manipulating you at any time.
That is dark.
It's dark. It's dark. It's big. And we haven't even got into like the neurotechnology part of that, where will they even inhabit real worlds?
Well, that's the metaverse
real
again.
Physical worlds. What about, you know, will they have microchips implanted that are sending to the Russian FSB the precise moment when they're feeling vulnerable and scared, and that's when they get the message that's tailored to their precise emotion? This is not science fiction. All of that technology exists right now. It's you know, I think I got into this topic by necessity because I think this is the most important thing that we should be talking about. And I was amazed.
Yeah, I agree.
I went to look for resources on it. I was amazed that I couldn't find any. But this is the big topic that we need to be talking about.
Yeah, I tend to get my information for things like that are so cutting edge in development or just about to come to production from a very familiar place to cookers and conspiracy theorists for very different reasons. World Economic Forum, podcast and documentation. They tend to have a lot of this stuff because what they tend to do is they tend to get ahead of the curve by saying, okay, we've got these neural implants and they can do some really fucked up shit. I would hate for government to regulate that because it would really impact my profit line. So if we can find a way to make this thing look really innocent and make us look really like virtuous and nice, we'd be able to make this work. So let's do some altruism classes. Let's workshop this at Davos after some skiing. And then maybe we'll be able to make a shitload of money controlling people's brains. But if you listen to Radio Davos podcast or any of the other World Economic Forum podcasts, you can get a lot of information about this stuff, but you've got to read between the lines.
That is the most wonderful backhanded plug for Silicon Valley and Davos that I've ever heard. But I love it. I love it. If you as a listener, dear listener, do not want the world to be taken over by Davos and Silicon Valley, then you need to be paying attention to what they're saying. Absolutely.
That's what I would say, yeah. And also, like, it's fascinating stuff too. Like, and because there's a bit of money behind it, the podcast's well produced. The guy has this nice, neutral English accent. He's very British and lovely. Anyway, so look,
is it a real person? Do we even know? You know,
dude,
and if it is, then maybe I will accept their invitation, because I bet they've got a plush edit suite where, you know, they're feeding me fancy smoky whiskey in the green room, and I could achieve, you know, the more kind of drunk history vibe that I was looking for here.
I'll have to bring a flask next time I see you. Now I feel like I owe you a whiskey. So, like, carrying on from that and the kids, which are the future, one of the things that kids love being is, like, you know, I'm not going to be a fireman. I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a creator. I'm going to be a digital creator. And now it seems like there's a lot of jobs for digital creators, whether it be on Twitch playing video games, whether it be, you know, sort of exposing yourself to men for money, whatever you want to do as a digital creator, you've got these things you can grow up and be. It's great. But the other thing is that when it comes down to it, those are the jobs for the 1%. And I think there's going to be a lot more work in what I would call the sort of gig economy of bullshit, which is the monetized rage bait industry. You know, Twitter, Facebook, they both pay for clicks now. And you get clicks by making people angry and keeping them angry and then getting them angry again and making sure that whenever they want to find out why they're angry, they come to you and you make them angry again. That dopamine hit is, you know, it's addictive. So what do you think that the direction of that is? Because, like, I just think that the idea of this is basically just like exponential potential to just completely destroy reality, as we sort of talked about with that idea of people, you know, sort of withdrawing from the metaverse and having no sense of truth from 0 hour. But also, is this new? Or are we looking at just an extension of the sort of Ben Shapiro, Freedom Works, Koch brothers, the Koch divorce, all the stuff that's already happened, just in a different form, like a gig economy, as opposed to a bunch of full-time salaried bullshit artists who make disinformation for a living? I don't know.
Well, great question. Let me give you a preemptive plug for my next book, which is going to be on exactly this topic. So, you know, spoiler alerts upcoming. And I call this broad topic, you know, as it relates to society, can we have nice things anymore? Right? Because we live in an attention economy, and the political currency in that economy is just noise and anger and rage and outrage. Yep. And those things are wonderful at destroying ideas, and they are terrible at building up ideas. And we kind of see this played out in politics, where people like Trump are great in opposition and horrible in government, right? Because they seek to destroy and tear down, and they have no ideas to build up. They're all just, you know, rage bait. And so don't hate the player, hate the game, right?
Yeah.
This is that. Yeah. If you are, you know, a young woman growing up now and want to monetize this thing, some people have found very creative ways to do that. As you've mentioned, that's just a byproduct of an attention economy, right?
Yep.
So the problem that we have is this is really open to manipulation for those who understand how the attention economy works. And this is the scary bit, is you can actually kill any idea dead by flipping a switch and turning on this rage bait machine. And it goes into hysteria. You link any issue to the culture wars, you make it emotive, and you just deploy your army of real and fake people to just drown out any kind of coherent, you know, policy debate. So the bushfires in LA are a great example. So obviously the rational response there was like, holy shit, I believe we are living in a new climate reality. We need to really talk about this seriously. Look what's happening in LA. But they flipped a switch. They don't want to talk about that. There's a lot of vested interests who don't want to transition energy away from fossil fuels. They fund this machine that whips people into hysteria and keeps them distracted. So what did they say about the fires? They said that it was DEI programs making, recruiting firemen who weren't muscular enough was one of the quotes. It was environmental regulations in terms of, I think Trump got up and said, because they're trying to protect some fish in some river, that's why the fires happened. And then other people try to attack the fact that some indigenous Native American tribe had some land protected there. This is all by design. And what you see as the manifestation is this hysterical social media feed of, noise, outrage, hysteria, rage about a topic. And what does it do? We're not talking about the solutions anymore. We're not actually going to address the problem. We're not taking it seriously. And so if you hypothetically lived in a world where we actually need massive policy reforms to survive, that's really bad news, right?
That's bad news.
Because anyone who sticks their neck out and says, hey, let's change something, we can't do that anymore, gets shouted down in that environment by design. Yeah. So can we have nice things anymore is my shorthand for that.
That chapter's going to hurt. A lot of these chapters hurt as well, though, to be fair. But
that's why the dad jokes come in, Joel.
The dad jokes really I was about to say that.
You can't tell people that we're all going to die without inserting a few dad jokes in there to distract them.
It does. I must say, the audiobook guy, although he does mispronounce a few things which make me laugh for a very different reason, did a pretty good job delivering some of the jokes. He was professional. I hope you do the next one, though, because
it's tough. It's tough. I got, and I'm interested if you get any feedback from your listeners. I did ask to narrate that audio book and sent them a sample, and they quite politely said, you know what, I think we're going to go with a professional voiceover artist. So maybe I'm just grating, and that was the harsh reality check I needed.
Because John Safran, he narrates his own books, and you know what he sounds like? Yeah, we don't need to expand on that.
Well, there's hope for us all.
I totally 100%. So speaking of us all, is anyone actually immune from disinformation? Because we think we are, because people on this podcast are really smart and we don't do disinformation. We laugh at idiots who do disinformation because they're stupid and gullible. Are we?
Well, yeah, this is the fun part, right? We tend to think, stupid people fall for stupid, things they see on the internet. Unfortunately, I have to inform your listeners that's not true. We are, as I mentioned before, our brains are wired a certain way, and there's nothing we can do about that. And that's just a feature of being human, not being smart or stupid.
We love being bullshit.
In fact, I have even worse news that the more intelligent and the more educated you are, the more likely you are to twist information to fit your existing worldview.
God damn it.
And people who are less intelligent and less educated. So this is, it's the opposite of what people think. And you can understand why, right? Like your brain is actually doing a really good job of what it's supposed to do. So, kudos to your brain for being way worse at disinformation, because that means you're smart. But a good example of this was, if you remember back to 2017, Trump had a teeny tiny crowd at his inauguration, and they said it was a really big crowd. And some researchers looked and they showed photos of Obama's crowd, which obviously has like 3 or 4 times as many people as Trump's crowd. And they said, which picture has more people in it, A or B? And of course, all the Trump supporters, despite what their eyes were telling them, said that, Trump had more supporters. Now, if you had a university degree, you were more likely to get that question wrong.
Isn't that just
less likely?
So
and
bad?
That's the same thing. Like your brain was a little bit better at saying, you know what, I'm gonna like give a middle finger to this question and show that my tribal loyalties are more important, and I'm going to say that picture has more people in it. So nobody is immune to disinformation, and we all do the same things. That's why it's so effective, because it's really just taking advantage of how every human's brain works.
Yeah, Yeah, totally. I mean, like there's a few things to that, which is like, I can definitely relate to that insofar as you've got the idea of going into a comment section, going to a thread on Twitter or something like that, and having some sort of argument with someone where you find that the people who can sort of tend to spell and punctuate better tend to be better at doing gymnastics to justify their dovey beliefs. And you end up getting to a point where you're almost in a stalemate because they will just say anything to maintain the weird concept that they're completely wrong about every time they're always wrong about, of course. And you know, like you just end up being sort of pushed into a corner there. Whereas on the other side, when you have a resounding victory and you get a small feeling of satisfaction, it's not that they come back and say, oh, you got a good point. They just block you or they just stop responding.
Yeah, you also got to pay attention to like where this is happening, right? Nobody on social media has ever said, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I'm completely wrong."
It's like
right?
telling someone angry to calm down. They're like, "Oh no, good point."
Exactly. This is a zero-sum game, right? Like you're
totally.
You're trying to shout at people, and blocking is you know the sign that you've got under their skin. And so this is the other thing, right? Like people ask me all the time, how do I correct my drunk uncle who thinks that Democrats keep babies locked in, the basements of pizza stores? And the short answer is, well, it's going to be very hard, but you're certainly not going to do it on a Facebook comment thread, right? The incentive when you're in that kind of public display of your opinions is to be right and the other person to be wrong. And that's why people are dickheads on the internet and quite nice in real life. So if you were to have the same conversation face to face with your drunk uncle, human nature will make you both find middle ground and consensus.
It'll make it less road ragey and weird.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Now, if nobody's seen it, there's a wonderful example of this at the moment. It's this year's Australia Day lamb ad. You go and put the YouTube comment in wherever you communicate to your listeners, because it's actually all about this, and it has people in a grandstand shouting out what they would say on an internet comment. And it proves this point very, very nice. So
the lamb.
They've done another good one, and it's right on this topic.
Oh God, that sounds kind of hilarious / depressing. Yeah, it is. It's an interesting thing. I think when it comes to internet arguing, this is my sort of tack on that. I will argue with someone on the internet most of the time. Either it's because I'm bored and I feel like a dopamine hit, and that's fine. I don't feel that bad about that. But if I want to find out the gymnastics, I try and find the smartest man on the thread. I try and give them a bit of a bit of bait, and then see what they say. Like the Elon Musk salute recently, I found it very interesting to bait people who are backing Elon on that to try and find their justifications. Saying the ADL said it wasn't a salute is a nice one. So they're like, appealing to authority. I'm like, mate, you're a right-wing cooker. You never appeal to authority. You hate the ADL on any day, any day.
Don't tell me that some right-wing cooker on the internet is being hypocritical. I don't believe it.
I know, right? But
it's another good reminder about, this whole way our brains work, right? That we think, well, Trump once said, that the sky is blue. He can't say it's green now. No, they don't care about that. They will say whatever they want to fit to their belief. And quite often it is 180-degree opposite of what they said last week. Yeah. So, I think that's just the nature of the internet. It's why it's a terrible place that we have our political discourse now. And,
it's a bad town square.
I will say, though, Joel, you did a great job of importing this in the real world. Joel came to one of my book events and did shout down a heckler. And it was really like, it really was being like in a real world version of one of these internet comment threads. But yes, normally people are much more consensus based in person.
My favorite person who asks a question at a book launch is the inevitable person who asks a question aggressively who hasn't read the book. I love that.
Yeah. Yes, and so as my response to him at the time was, I'm like, mate, you probably shouldn't have admitted at the start that you haven't read it.
Yeah, that might be a problem. Paul Hand, not to go too high off topic, but he wrote the book The Soul, which is about 900,000 pages. And it's like a 40-hour audiobook, which I read. I've listened to like 8 hours of it. I'm going to get there. But at the book launch, there was like 6 people asking questions. And they were all like, oh, what about this? And it's like, well, I do cover that in the book. So, I mean, that's good. But like, it's sort of like, have you bought it? Yeah, good. It's great. You can find out. Okay. And they're all really pointed and all quite aggressive. And I think there was a bit of like that sort of Christian thing of, how dare you speak about the soul? And it's like, well, I mean, I kind of addressed that. but we can talk about it here, I guess. I mean,
It's on page 847 if you haven't got that far yet.
It's so big. I don't know how he does those books. Anyway, so look, going past that, like just as a bit of an aside, we're looking at this situation where we're walking sort of blindly towards a metaverse. The participatory nature of conspiracy theories and disinformation right now, as it stands, is bad. We have people who feel like they're a part of the story. You had the guy recently deceased who went to Comet Ping Pong, shot the place up, trying to find the kids in the tunnels, in the basement. That didn't work out well for him. But that is like analog participatory conspiracy universe. Now, the only thing that I can say as far as I say, we're sort of walking toward the metaverse, is that maybe the next guy who does that is going to shoot up a fake Comet Ping Pong in a fake Washington. And that isn't so bad. But the idea that someone is going to go into this metaverse and then come out when they're pulling their bins out and suddenly lose their minds and take off their glasses and do something stupid, I don't know. I feel like that's on the cards. Is it getting worse? Is it going to get worse?
Once again, the whole reason that we have conspiracies is, again, our brains need to interpret meaning from what we see around us. Yeah. So that's a good thing, right? Like I see something happen with my own eyes and I fit it into something that I need to act on. Like, here comes a speeding car bearing down on me. I need to jump out of the way. When the information gets very complicated and confusing, then in order for us to file it appropriately, we have to make it make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And unfortunately, the world doesn't make sense sometimes. Sometimes you might just get some rhino virus jump from a pangolin to someone in a wet market in China and start infecting people. Maybe that's just what happened, and there is no grand narrative around it, right? But we still have to put narrative around it to find meaning. So that's never going to go away. That's never going to go away. And when do we find an increase in conspiracy theories? In times of conflict and disruption and crazy shit going on in the world, right? So that's why they went through the roof during the pandemic. So that's never going to go away. That's something that we just are always going to have to deal with. The question is, how are they going to manifest? How are they going to pollute whole groups of people? How do they recruit people? Once a small number of people have an idea that this is the meaning behind an event, how do they then recruit a large number of people, and how fully do they buy into it? And that's where technology is going to be really helpful for people who want to spread their fringe beliefs. They won't stay fringe anymore. And then that's already happened with technology, right? The algorithms on social media are designed not to correct you, but to find other people who share your fringe belief and connect you to them. Yeah. And to show you their content. So that's current day. Future day, that's going to get even more effective, and we're going to get less of the shared reality, common baseline of information. And so think about the TikTok generation, right? There's currently a trend going around that really bad bikini tan lines are fashionable. Yeah. Right? Okay. How do you get to that audience and say, this will cause you skin cancer? This is a terrible idea. You are literally doing damage to your skin that may be fatal. Yeah. How do you get to them? Because their entire world is information from people they respect, people they look up to, who are telling them, this is a really great idea. Go and get one of these really bad bikini tans. And once they show an interest in that, they get flooded with more of that content. And the algorithm will suppress anyone who wants to contradict that, because it's smart enough to know that that person doesn't want to see something that says this causes skin cancer. No, so this is a current day example of the types of things, large and small, right? These conspiracies don't have to be big. The big global conspiracies about, the Gettys and the Rothschilds being in a secret cabal, they can be small, around like, get a tan, it's healthy, Yeah. So these things are proliferating, and it's the spread and the technology and they being cut off for information that we can do something about, rather than the fact are people going to come up with conspiracies? They'll always do that.
Yeah, there's actually a podcast that sort of covers that. I think it's called Everyday Conspiracies. I only recently found it on the Great Australian Pods podcast directory. Anyone listening, Sherry does this amazing work of basically archiving all the Australian podcasts and lists them everywhere. And this Everyday Conspiracy thing it's not about the grand cabals. It's not about the Rockefellers and things. It's just about things like, why are you eating 2 pieces of gum? And then it goes through like Extra do ads where they had 2 pieces of gum, and they'll go through some sort of like chronicle ding and look up why some marketing asshole at some point went, you know what? Let's just make people eat 2 pieces of gum. That'll double their gum consumption. We are so smart. Let's have some more cocaine. And it's great. It's really good. So that's sort of something worth catching. But it is, the underlying principle is a thing of like, conspiracies come sort of large and small. And I think we are entering what Trump wouldn't call the golden age of conspiracy, because conspiracy theories are one thing where you just make shit up based on an idea. And there's a place for that when you sort of think, okay, I'm seeing something here and I reckon this is next. I'm going to go with that. But you need to be like, you need to be at least saying, okay, this isn't necessarily happening. This is a theory. You need to be sort of clear about that. And that's what conspiracy theorists don't do. They say, this is happening. This is happening. And one of the things about this is that the dollar is going to fall as a result. So buy this gold. Here's my affiliate link. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get it now. Good. But the golden age conspiracy is definitely coming, because if you look at all these tech oligarch types, you look at all this stuff that's happening that is quite out in the open, you get the opening line, the opening paragraph of a story that you can really choose your own adventure on. And to be honest, in a lot of these situations, you're probably not going to be wrong, because they are plotting to get you, and that sucks. Anyway, so moving away from the US for now and moving back to Australia, we are staring down the barrel of a federal election. Gina Rinehart and her terrifying wallet and Ayn Rand book collection are very chummy with Peter Dutton. And I don't want you to give away too much, because you probably know more than you should. But what is the role of disinformation in the next federal election campaign? What do you reckon? And also, do you think it's going to come from the right or from the left or from both? Are we going to see more campaigns that come from Labor that have like maybe a few obvious porkies in them? I don't know.
Well, short answer, a lot of the things that we've talked about on this pod we'll see in our own feeds during the election. And so chiefly is this idea that you can tear down and destroy ideas and people and leaders with this outrage machine. And then you will also have a network set up to make that much more effective. Now, how do we know this? Well, we just went through a referendum and we actually got to live the shared experience of this in action. So this is only going to increase. So what did we see in the referendum was a playbook that was imported directly from the US around the kind of MAGA ecosystem. And the MAGA ecosystem, they have all sorts of different players who have these AstroTurf groups, which is like a fake grassroots community group. They have fake news pages. They own their own media. They have armies of supporters who are well-trained, that you go and provide a swarm around a certain idea that really amplifies it. And then, of course, you have the bot farms that just do that artificially. And the messages that you do that with are usually not true and linked to the culture wars and emotive and designed to provoke outrage. So let's map that out in the referendum, the Voice to Parliament referendum. We had the types of messages that you would need a permit to put a fence up in your own backyard if there was a voice. That's kind of hysterical. You got it connected to a lot of these woke lefty hysteria-driven rage bait type, messages that were not true. A lot of racist undertones to them as well. And then what happened to them was the interesting thing. We saw them spread all throughout the internet by both authentic groups set up to do them and inauthentic groups set up to do them. We saw a lot of AI manipulated videos, putting things out in other languages, looking for, communities that maybe weren't reading mainstream English newspapers. You can do that with a click of a button now. We saw some posts that had tens and tens of thousands of shares and only like 5 or 10 likes. Right?
Yeah, I know.
That is a bot farm, right? That is a bot farm. You saw, groups like Advance Australia all of a sudden really up their game in terms of their campaign tactics.
Yeah, they
Now-
brought in Yanks.
They brought in Yanks because the tactics they did were exactly things that we saw in the US. And so what we're going to get this is happening around the issue of nuclear. It's happening around energy transition. We've seen around offshore wind, these big disinformation campaigns that they
Think
kill
of the
whales,
whales.
which they don't, for the record. And a lot of that is spread through these fake grassroots community groups through the same kind of tactics. So what will we see during the election here? Well, we know that Peter Dutton is very good at those type of culture war, emotion, outrage types of messages. And, will we be talking about targets for emission reductions? No, we'll be talking about Anthony Albanese doesn't want you to eat meat, or, Scott Morrison said, we can't have electric cars because you're going to ruin the weekend and ban your ute. And, so we'll have a lot of those type of, hysterical messages that aren't based in fact. But then what to look out for is watch how they spread around the internet and all those kind of tactics and all of these
inorganic reach.
Exactly. And it's very effective, right? We get our opinions from the internet. So that's where it's going to be. And unfortunately, I fear that, Labor will be there playing checkers with a traditional campaign in the newspapers and on TV, and Peter Dutton will be playing chess using a lot of these tactics. And don't ask me to make a prediction because, again, you might not like the answer.
Yeah, I don't love it. I'm not putting money on this election despite how much I want to. Now, we could talk about Mark Zuckerberg appearing to lose his mind, but realistically just doing his libertarian tech bro thing, and also the general sense of ominous grief that's going to come from TikTok being manipulated by Trump. But I've had you for an hour now. Have you got any more time, or you want to get out of here and we can do a part 2?
I will always make time for this podcast, as I say. Although as long as you commit to the next one, whenever we do a part 2 for it to be in person with a beer in hand, then I will give you as much time as you need.
I can absolutely organize that. Well, my friend, let's move on to Mark Zuckerberg going back to his roots. And by roots, I mean looking like he did in 1987. That haircut. It's interesting. It's a choice. He looks gin-soaked and weird. Anyway, so look, he's now got Dana White on the board of Facebook, which is a clear nod to Trump. He's one of the most influential people that Trump knows. Dana White famously called up Trump and basically said, maybe give Bud Light another shot because of a deal with UFC. And Trump went, look, maybe we got it wrong. Give him a second chance. That's a mental amount of influence, and that's what Zuckerberg's doing. Also, basically saying we're no longer doing fact-checking, taking away the DEI things, removing tampons from men's bathrooms, which probably costs more to do than actually just leaving them there. It's, it's all that like kissing the ring and taking a knee stuff. But especially when it comes to the fact-checking thing, what does it mean? Because like I said before, does removing a fact-checker even really matter? Getting fact-checked is a badge of honor for these people. So, does it matter?
Well, look, it is really significant. Facts should be checked, 100%.
I agree.
But it's not very effective when you do.
Yes,
so
that's what I was fishing for. Because I had a feeling
without going into the the whole ins and outs of what the research says about fact checking, I think it's more important about the signal that this sends to the world about what's happening at Meta.
Yeah.
So, brief history of the last few years at Meta was there were really two camps there. Some who said, "Whoa, we wield a lot of influence over society. I think we should do some things to make sure we are responsible, users of that power."
Yeah.
And those which is really more representative of how Silicon Valley thinks, which is let the crowd decide. We are a platform, open everything.
Libertarians.
And
cool.
Exactly. Don't censor anything. And after we all learnt that Russia used Facebook to, influence the US election in 2016, the first camp really had the ascendancy. And we saw a lot of measures like that's when the labeling and fact-checking came in, actually.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. So they would allow academic researchers, access to Facebook data so that they could monitor for disinformation and things.
Yeah.
That's all been thrown out the window. Those people are extinct species. And that's the significance of this really big move of getting rid of fact-checking is more about the signal that all bets are off when it comes to Meta. and they will swing hard for MAGA. And so we've already seen some examples of they may already be influencing the algorithm to favor conservative worldviews.
That's
and
what
accounts.
matters to me.
And it's not equal and level. And if you get your information from Facebook and Instagram, then you are expecting to get 50% of information from one side, 50% of information from the other, and making your own mind up.
Very
that ain't going to happen.
Yes. No,
that ain't
it's
going to happen.
not.
They've got the thumb on the scale.
Yeah.
And what Zuckerberg is saying to Trump is, I am pushing hard on my thumb for you.
Yeah.
Don't regulate me. Invest in my data sensors.
Yes.
Be my friend, probably.
Give me H-1B visas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. 100%.
So that's the worrying thing, and that's the significance of it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And like the other thing that's interesting with the Dana White thing and the fact that he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think we did it on a Patreon episode though, so I guess I'm not really repeating myself. But, he goes on Rogan, he has MMA brain, and that rabbit hole is deep. So I don't know how much of this is Mark Zuckerberg just being a libertarian Silicon Valley dickhead, how much of this is using the idea of MMA brain to make excuses for why he's doing things that are purely profit-driven, or if he really is just another douchebag who's listened to a lot of Joe Rogan, who thinks that Fauci should be prosecuted, and he's just got a bit of brain rot himself. Like Elon Musk has some of the most severe brain rot. Now we've realized, as a result of his recent actions, that maybe this is more about being the most powerful person in the universe, which is working really well for him, than just the fact that he genuinely dislikes certain people and has a role in the culture wars. But of course, when it comes to Zuckerberg, I think Zuckerberg is smarter and a lot more restrained than Musk, and his plays are interesting. And I'm not convinced that there's not a little bit of brain rot in there. I think most of this is pursuing a profit and power motive. But speaking of
who's got the real brain rot here? All the people that you've rattled off have won, and they're doing incredibly well. And so the argument is that in fact they are the more rational actors than say all the Democrats and those who are opposing all of this on this side, who did display a lot of brain rot in thinking that you had a population that were hurting and you should tell them that it's okay, you're actually fine, the economy's doing really well, and we should keep everything and all of our institutions exactly the way they are, I would argue is its own form of brain rot. So, these people have got what they wanted. And, Trump is not pretending to be anyone else. Trump is being Trump, but it's very effective. And there are a lot of people around him who understand that they can actually use that to their advantage. And big business is massively behind Trump because they can manipulate him to get rid of regulation and impose tariffs on their competitors and, manipulate markets for him. And Silicon Valley understands that they were about to get regulated out of existence in about 2016 once we realized how powerful and dangerous they were. Yeah. That's an existential crisis. And the fact that their actions, which look crazy, have resulted in a scenario where that's now not going to happen in the US, I'd say displays highly rational behavior on their part. And, shame on society for creating an environment where they have to act like a doofus in order to, be successful. That's just because society is a bit of a doofus in America at the moment. And they are playing to the crowds and playing into very primal instincts and emotions and characteristics that people have. So I would say that's the chess part, right?
Totally.
That's being outplayed.
I think one of the biggest questions of our time is Elon Musk the smartest man in the world, or a complete fucking moron? I don't know.
I have my opinion. I think he's been very lucky, and the times have suited him. But I think he's definitely able to spot an opportunity, and that's what they've got.
The Tesla stock price is basically based on mostly lies. But why do people believe them? That's a talent in itself. So, I mean, it's really difficult. But these tweets, you look at it and you're like, either you're speaking to the crowd and you're telling them exactly what they want to hear because you're so smart that you know exactly what they want to hear, or you are speaking from your heart because you are an actual fucking idiot. I don't know.
Or both, right? Like that.
Could be both, yeah.
Nazi salute was a Nazi salute.
It was a Nazi
He knew
salute.
what he was doing,
knew
but
what
he
he was
also
doing.
knew that if we put it in there in a phrase, like from my heart to yours,
Yeah.
that the liberal media would have conniptions, and all of that was by design. Now,
He could laugh his
you
ass
have to be
off.
pretty uncool and a terrible person to do it. That's probably true. But it
Mhm.
also is rational and planned behavior that led to the outcome that they thought it was going to happen. So,
Yeah.
you know, both things can be true.
Yeah. So I think the next thing is we're in this situation here where TikTok is about to be banned in the US unless a deal is struck. And a lot of the power as to whether a deal happens or not is based on the power of the executive, the president, and the executive orders that he has. Well, I wouldn't say complete power over. Stephen Miller seems to be writing most of them. But this lends opportunity for Trump to A, grift some money because he can get one of his mates to buy half a TikTok for pennies on the pound. He keeps on saying that America should own TikTok, which makes me think that nationalization's on the cards. I cannot see that happening. I would support that. That'd be one of the very few things I'd be like, you know what, Trump, good on you. Like, you've actually nationalized something. I'm totally down with that. Let's get more bolshy if we can. But the reality is right now, Joe Biden left the White House saying they're not going to enforce the TikTok ban. And yet TikTok turned off their servers for a day with a big splash screen saying, we need President Trump to save us. And then they turned the servers back on saying that President Trump saved us. They didn't have to do that. They chose to do that. And what they're doing, I think, is basically sucking up to Trump to try and make sure that whatever deal gets done is good. And, you know, we don't know. Like, you know, say like the TikTok CEO could really be playing this and really have Trump in the palm of his hand. But there's definitely a very sort of tense situation there. One thing that I did notice is that I saw this could be bullshit. I didn't look into it far enough because I'm such a good digital citizen and I know my disinformation. That Free Palestine has been flagged as a comment that you can't do anymore. That's an interesting one. And Trump not being famous for being a Zionist, but definitely being one of the people who will just say yes to anyone who gives him money may very well have been instrumental in that. That could even be a Biden thing. I don't fucking know. He's a Zionist. But like the reality is TikTok are now in a very precarious situation where they have to appease the king. What do you think this is going to do to the quality of information being served by one of the most powerful algorithms in the world, speaking to some of the most impressionable minds in the world? What's going to happen?
Well, who's playing who here is the real question. There could be two different things. Things have worked out very well for TikTok at a time they're about to get, you know, booted out of the US, which is a very large market for their global users.
Oh, absolutely.
And all of a sudden, you know, or every demographic swings hard for, for Trump. It's not true that young people swung for Trump, in case you see him saying
36%, was it? Yeah.
That is disinformation. You know, they
He
did
just
not.
made it up on the spot. He was like, oh, 36%. I won by 36%. Oh, thanks, mate.
The other thing, I mean, you've got to reflect on how does authoritarianism work? You know, the whole idea is less about, you know, gulags and jails and re-education camps and you know, secret police, and more about the fear of those things and the fear of missing out driving action in corporations, institutions, and people within that society. So you come to power like Trump has with the fear that he will take revenge on his enemies, as authoritarians do, and you don't actually have to do anything. People will just comply because you've created that impression. Yeah. So Zuckerberg has done it. TikTok has done it. Maybe Elon Musk has done it. Maybe he's just an actual Trump bro himself. And now watch everyone else, you know, fall in line and do it as well. People self-censor. They preemptively act to avoid retribution. Yeah, you know, all of these sorts of things. That's really how our authoritarian society works. And so what TikTok has done has said, look at me, dear leader. I will actually kowtow to exactly your worldview and help you. And I will be, you know, on your side. And Trump has done a 180 as an example. So maybe Trump is playing TikTok, maybe TikTok is playing Trump. And they've certainly got the outcome they wanted, which for now, at least, we'll see how it goes in the courts, is they're allowed to keep their US user base. Now, the interesting and funny footnote to this whole story has been what a lot of these young influencers on TikTok did while thinking they were going to have to leave TikTok was actually go to a Chinese social media platform called Red Note, the little red book, and begin to learn Mandarin. And embrace Chinese cultural, signposts and all this, and really, and we can all laugh that the exact thing that the authorities are trying to stop with TikTok just got worse as a result of their ban. But
so funny.
I will say, everyone who's on that platform finds it very positive and rewarding, and they have a genuine cultural exchange. And maybe, you know what? Maybe it's building bridges that are going to help us down the road when China invades Taiwan.
Yeah, well, there is that. Yeah, look, I mean, the idea of pivoting toward China by choice or by force, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in that regard. And when you've got such an unstable United States of America, it's tricky. I would say, off topic, I think the Elbows can be really good at making Trump think that he likes him. And that I think that the restraint elbow shown, which I wouldn't have, I would have been like, Trump's dangerous. I would have done the Mark Latham. Donald Trump is the most dangerous man in the world. Everyone's like, yeah, fuck that guy. And then when he gets up, I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, I think I probably should resign. I don't think my position is not tenable. Fuck. So Elbows played it really down the line, which is one of the centrist things that might actually be beneficial outside of all the other centrist things that have bored me and made me sad. Anyway, so as far as that goes, have you got any closing remarks on what you think about disinformation in general? Because we've wrapped up a lot of things, but is there one of the things you want to tell the audience just as a standout thing? Anything is in you're thinking, I hope that bastard asked me this question. Come on, get to the good shit.
I think we've done a very good job of covering a lot of ground. I would say,
I feel pretty good.
My parting word is, what do you do about all this, right? Like, it's easy to paint the doom and gloom.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of what those spreading disinformation do that we can borrow for them, which is entirely legitimate.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you see it as your role and your community's role as in the people who follow this podcast and are generally interested in these ideas, as spreading truth and preventing, rabbit holes and keeping, a cohesive fact-based reality as the mainstream.
Yep.
There's a lot that the disinformation people do that we can borrow for them. And the first thing that they do is they tell good stories and make it entertaining. And I hope this podcast is a good example of a way to do that. The second thing they do, which is really powerful, is they have these incredibly powerful networks, and they are on a mission to use these networks to spread their worldview. So, where is the passionate organizing with equal levels of intensity around, the fact that climate change is responsible for the LA bushfires, that is equal to the passionate networked hysteria being spread around that it was like flabby firemen who aren't muscular enough, right?
We don't broads.
Yeah.
Ethnic broads.
Exactly. Yeah. Or a tiny fish that they tried to stop being extinct. So, we fact checking is not the equivalent. That's not the counter response. That's not the counterpunch. The counterpunch is taking a lot of legitimate things that they do and doing them much better ourselves, which is having networks that are organized and interested and passionate about doing the right thing and spreading the right information.
So I know what you're saying. What you're saying is that people like cookers and right-wingers and all these sort of people who tend to have the more malign sort of interests are so good at creating these groups where they will share content, amplify each other, make sure that everyone's on the same page with all of this information they've got. And what we should be doing is doing the same thing where we form networks to share this podcast almost exclusively to as many people as possible to make sure that our numbers go through the roof. Then George Soros sends us checks. We get a nice plush studio. And then we basically just record every day for 4 hours at a time. We might start wearing beanies. I'm going really bald. And we'll just make a fortune and maybe cut a deal with some Russians and, maybe then start our own UFC.
That is exactly what I'm saying.
I thought that was what you were saying.
If only you had some kind of online presence where people could share this content and connect with other like-minded people, that would be a wonderful idea.
Unfortunately, we have a shitposting group on Facebook, which is private. You could join it. Please do. But I do vet people coming in because people postings in there under an assumption that they are safe, because the unfortunate thing about our cookers is they're a little bit aggressive and insane. And a lot of our people will post in there with their personal Facebook profiles and will expose themselves to what could be perceived as danger. And some of them, I think, should be doing more anonymous posting, but hey, it's up to you. One thing I do find very funny, though, is I've read articles about us in the cooker media, and one of them was really funny, said, oh yeah, and that Joel Hill guy who's obviously using a fake persona. And I'm just like, oh, okay, cool.
Who are you really? Time to come clean.
Who am I really? And the reason why I'm using my real name and not doing the same thing is all the other podcasters who use some sort of pseudonym to avoid that general sort of like unwanted attention is my sister, who is, you know, of course, my prominent journalist. And I was talking to her about whether I should do that. She's like, well, I don't use a fake name. And I'm like, fuck. Like, I'm going to get way more death threats than you. I'm like, oh, you have made me. Okay, fine. I'll use my name. You have basically, you know, you've goaded me into using my real identity. If something bad happens, it's your fault.
Well, we are all journalists now, and with great power comes great responsibility and real names.
Yeah, well, I do agree. I do agree to a certain extent, but I tell you
what. That said, your podcasting host, your co-host, is a journalist who uses a name other than his own. So maybe we're wrong on that one.
His name isn't Jack. But what I will say is also, if you can find it, I strongly recommend his book, Jack the Insider, Insider's Guide to Australia. It is great. And it has a lot of our mutual friends in it, which is very funny. Now, we will do part 2. And hey, maybe we'll do a South by Southwest session. That'd be fun. I'll see when the sort of announce something. I'll steal you from Dan Illich. Sucked in, Dan. You can't have him this year. He's mine.
2 podcasts enter, 1 podcast leave.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. I really look forward to your new book. Your current book is definitely worth buying. Don't do the thing where you don't buy the old book because the new book is coming out. Don't be that guy. He was very nice about being honest about that. Your honesty might cost you some thousands. I strongly recommend getting both versions, but the audiobook is fantastic because, of course, you can do the dishes and listen to it. But it's a genuinely good book. And like I say, like some of the other ones that I've read that are lovely and well-intended, but realistically, it's just that thing of like, disinformation's a thing now and I'm going to write an essay on it. Whereas you know you shit. So it was really good.
Well, look, I haven't written a second one yet, so it will not be coming out anytime soon.
What are you time here for? Get writing.
In the meantime, go available in all good bookstores, or probably the remainder bins now. You're better off going online.
Oh, shit, I paid retail. Damn it.
Yeah. Well, look, you know, and the publisher thanks you. The authors will get some of that money. Not enough to retire on, but enough to keep coming on these sorts of podcasts.
Well, that's all I want. That's all I ask for. And look, we'll try and do part 2 soon. And thank you so much for coming on again. And if anyone's got any money left over after having bought your book, please buy CVCO beer, because if you don't, you will be way too literate. Drinking enhances your ability to read. I strongly recommend sitting back, drinking a few beers, reading this book, and hoping you remember some of it. If you're drinking the IPA, you probably won't. It's really strong. Anyway, got my beer plug in. Forgot to do it at the start. Thanks, guys.
Keep up the good work.
I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
Fuck me, you guys are bastards!